All right, language learning consistency, a complete guide. So this is a video that I've kind of been wanting to make and then planning and working on for a while. I'm basically going to walk you through a complete guide to staying consistent with language learning, because we all know, I found this picture and I think it's pretty good. If content is king, consistency is queen. That's definitely true. And especially with language learning, I think lack of consistency is one of the biggest problems. So without further ado, let's go. Inconsistency is one of the biggest stallers when it comes to language learning progress. And by stallers, I basically mean like, you're doing it, you've done a few days in a row of language learning work and then you stop for a few days. And then obviously you know what happens from there. You forget words, you get rusty, you forget grammar rules you've learned, you know what I mean? Like inconsistency in any kind of thing you're trying to get better at is bad. So I think understanding how to stay consistent is one of the highest ROI skills you can learn. And by ROI, I mean return on investment, as in high ROI things, you learn them and they're super, super valuable. Learning to stay consistent is of course super, super valuable. So this video is a complete guide I've put together. It's probably going to be at least half an hour. Obviously, you know how long it is because you're watching it. But yeah, it's a complete guide I've put together on everything I know about language learning consistency at the moment. And I've designed it to basically help you maximize your consistency so you can essentially maximize your language learning progress. The more consistent you are and the more I don't want to say strict because that sounds bad, but yeah, just the more consistent you are with your learning overall, the more progress you'll make, because progress is compounding. When you take breaks from language learning, it's not good. You need to be consistent, and we're going to go through literally everything in this video. So I'll try and have timestamps in the description. If you do like this kind of educational content that I make on language learning, definitely hit the subscribe button and make sure to share this video with someone you know who also could benefit it. I do make these videos for free, so it does really make me feel good about all the time I put in for free to help you guys. So yeah, let's go. How this video works, just a really quick rundown. So I'll just say respect to you for clicking on a long form, low dopamine educational video. You could be watching absolute crap, but you're not. Hopefully you watch this whole video. So yeah, respect to you for that. And you're probably a top 1% intellectual. This video is basically split into chapters. So as I said, timestamps. We're basically going to go over a bunch of different things. I'll show you the chapter index on the next slide. And you don't have to watch this video in one go, but ideally, it might be better too, depending on how long it is. But yeah, you can watch it in sections. Don't watch it in the background. You should probably pay attention just because there's a lot of value in this video. It's not really something you could listen to in the background, but yeah, and I'd like you to implement all the steps in this video. Nothing would make me more sad than you watch this and then do nothing. So yeah, everything I put in this video is extremely useful. I do it myself. I don't tell you to do anything I don't do. If I tell you guys to do something, I've either done it in the past or I'm currently doing it, and I'm completely honest about that. So with that said, let's go. Here are the 4 sections of this video. So we're going to define consistency, I'm going to explain why consistency is important, particularly in language learning. I'm going to explain what causes inconsistency and then how to boost your consistency. And if I've done all 4 of these things, which I have, you're about to hear, you will walk away from this video a much, much stronger, intellectual, a much more consistent person, a much better language learner overall. And this is just kind of an important life skill that can apply to a bunch of different things. I'm losing my English. This is what happens when you learn Russian. English takes a backseat. But yeah, defining consistency. So what do I mean when I say consistency? I'm going to define consistency as performing the same tasks habitually as a routine to maximize growth in a certain area. So for example, consistent flashcards to memorize a certain list of words. Say you're learning colors, you've got flashcards for the colors in Italian or whatever language you're learning, and then you just consistently do them, and that's going to help you learn it. Or another example, consistent listening to improve your speed of understanding. We all know understanding people is really hard in a foreign language. Like your brain's really slow. You'll pick out one word and just miss the rest if you're lucky as a beginner. And so yeah, consistent listening would also improve your speed of learning. That's what I mean by consistency. You're just going to keep doing the same kind. You're just going to basically keep language learning. You're not going to take massive breaks, if you know what I mean. That's pretty straightforward. And of course, we are consistent to maximize our growth in a certain area. And that is, of course, what happens when you are consistent. Your growth compounds. So that's defining consistency out of the way. Done. All good. By the way, if you guys have any comments, comment them down below and I'll try and respond and give you a hand. Why consistency is important. So we've established that consistency is what I just said it was, but why is it actually important? Well, the reason it's important is because at the end of the day, language learning is a skill. You're learning a series of skills in the language, and this is basically the process for learning a skill, and I'll explain why consistency is important here in a second. So the process of learning skills basically goes like this. You can't do something at all. You learn how to do it in theory. You do it for the first time badly and you're slow at it. You do it a lot of times and over time get better until finally you're proficient and you can say you can do it. So this could apply to a whole language, but a language is basically a million tiny micro skills stuck together. So if we take Italian, for example, one tiny micro skill in Italian is Italian greetings, like hello, goodbye, ciao, arrivederci. I'm not going to list them all because you don't need to know Italian, but yeah. So we would start in this micro skill, for example, of not knowing Italian greetings at all. We can't do it at all. Then we would learn the theory. So we would, potentially we'd find a website or a YouTube video explaining them all. We'd make a list. We would maybe put them into flashcards. And then we would do it for the first time badly. So we'd continually do the flashcards and we'd get it right eventually. We'd be really slow and really bad at remembering which is which. We'd make mistakes. We'd maybe say buongiorno as good evening instead of good morning, which it correctly is. Maybe not that mistake because that one's pretty easy, but yeah, just basic mistakes like that. And then you do it a lot and you get better and better. You realize that buongiorno, it means morning and not good evening, like an idiot. I'm joking. And then I speak Italian, by the way. That was the first language I taught myself apart from English. I didn't really teach myself English. Anyway, getting distracted. You do it a lot and get better, and then finally, because you've done it so much, you can actually understand greetings in Italian. And that is basically how you learn a skill. So where does consistency come in? Because this video is about consistency. This is where consistency comes in. Consistency is a requirement for progress, and I'm going to explain why. Here, obviously, you don't need consistency because that's just you can't do something. That's you in like most languages. You can't speak them, obviously. You learn how to do it. That's basically you learning the theory from a YouTube video or a website, maybe a textbook if you're a bit old school, but probably not that. You do it for the first time and then you need to do it a lot and get better. And I've put a gold circle around here because of course we all know the truth is when you're learning words in a language, you don't just know them 90% of the time unless unless it's like the word acqua that means water in Italian, which, I'm pretty sure I just learned that straight away, never forgot it. You will forget stuff. And because your brain is only designed, this is probably going to something I'll talk about a bit later in the video. Your brain is not designed to remember every single thing you see. Your brain has a thing called, I'm sure you've heard of short-term and long-term memory. Short-term memory is basically, I tell you something, I believe short-term memory is on average 28 seconds, something like that. It's short. I could tell you something that you'd never heard of, for example, a 5-digit number, ask you to remember it. Within a few minutes, you'd probably forget. Maybe if you were exceptionally gifted, as far as your memory goes, you'd remember it. You'd have forgotten it within 3 days. Unless I told you it was of like incredible importance and you cut it into your arm, like you tried to force yourself to remember. If I just told you, you'd forget it because it's in your short-term memory. The way things go from your short-term memory to your long-term memory is through consistency, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, consistency is basically a requirement for learning stuff because at the end of the day, you're trying to put a language into your long-term memory. If you learn a language in your short-term memory, you've forgotten it in 28 seconds. That's just silly. Language goes into your long-term memory, and if you're not consistent, you're never going to actually make progress because I think I put down the bottom, this is really good. I thought of this like an hour ago maybe. Learning a new skill or learning a language is kind of like climbing out of quicksand. If you're not growing, you're dying. So if you're not actively, yes, I know quicksand doesn't actually work like this, but just, picture this. If you're not actually climbing up out of the quicksand, you're constantly being slowly sucked down. So as soon as you're not learning a language, you're slowly, forgetting it over time until like if you go a few weeks without practicing something, you might find you get a bit rusty as a beginner, maybe in even a few days. It just depends on how advanced you are. So you need to be consistent with your language learning. If you learn something one day and then you take the next 3 days off, and on the fifth day, because it would be 1 day, 3 days in between, and then the fifth day, you go back to trying to learn this topic or whatever it was you were studying, you're going to find you've basically forgotten it because you haven't actually put it into your long-term memory. So you need consistency. I'd also like to say, look around you, like forget language learning just for a second, look around you and see how many people actually stick to hobbies and goals they set. Like if people set themselves, keep note of this, don't obviously be like a prick, but like if you see someone who's quit their goal, just keep note of it. How long did they actually stick to their goal for? They said they were going to, go to the gym. They said they were going to learn a language. They said they were going to do, learn a gazillion different skills. Maybe they're going to do a martial art or whatever. And then they just quit after a little bit. They just stopped doing it. And that's so common. And, we can talk about why. It's because of our culture around events, our culture of like results over actual processes. We worship the result of something. We worship, having a good physique or being able to do all this really cool stuff or having a lot of money, but we don't worship the process involved, like, you know, all the hard work it takes to get there. That's a side note. But people wouldn't give up on their goals if progress was easy. Like, I want you, imagine someone you know that's given up on their goal. It could be you, to be honest. Just pick someone and have them in your head. Would they have given up on that goal if progress was easy? Say you know someone who tried to lose weight, for example, and they've given up on their goal. Imagine for them, magically, if we could go back in time, it wasn't actually difficult for them to do that. They literally just had to do one lap of the living room for 10 days in a row, and that's all it took to be in fantastic shape. Do you think they would have given up on their goal? Of course not, because it would be easy. Anyone can do that. Do one lap around your living room to be in fantastic shape. The reason they gave up on their goal was because it was too difficult, and difficulty arises through inconsistency. As, like we mentioned with quicksand before, as soon as you stop actually being consistent in something, you start to get sucked back down. If you're not growing, you're dying. As soon as you're missing days here and there and taking breaks, your knowledge in a language or anything is just going to start going backwards because it's been a while since you've done it. Your brain naturally starts to just get rid of that information because it doesn't see it as important anymore. That is why you need to be constantly consistent, or you won't make adequate progress in a language. And we mentioned before that your brain needs consistency to learn things. This is why. So there are basically 3 ways that your brain learns new information. And I'm not talking about short-term memory. I could tell you anything and you probably understand it. There's only 3 ways your brain puts something into your long-term memory, and that's in no particular order: importance, consistency. No, hold on. Let me just, excuse me. Let me just go from the top. Repetition is the first way, trauma is the second way, and similarity is the third way. All 3 of those reasons are to do with importance. So if you continually do something over and over again, for example, your phone number, you probably remember. A lot of people don't actually, which I find surprising, but your phone number you probably remember just because you use it constantly. That's in your long-term memory through repetition because you've constantly been doing it. Your brain understands that information is extremely important to know, and so it remembers it. The second way is through trauma. Obviously, we're not going to traumatize ourselves with language learning, but if something really traumatic happens to you, for example, or not even really traumatic, like you put your hand on a hot kettle, you're always going to remember that kettle is hot. Or for example, if you try and do a backflip, for example, and hurt yourself, you're going to have anxiety about going backwards, and you're not really going to be able to do it anymore, probably, because your brain is telling you that that's dangerous. So if you'll notice both of those reasons are to do with importance. Your brain is only putting things into long-term memory because it thinks they're important, and these are kind of the avenues. So repetition tells your brain it's important because you're constantly using it. Trauma tells your brain it's important because you could have got hurt or died. It's your nervous system instructing your brain this is important information. And then similarity is also a way of remembering. For example, if I asked you to remember a random, 10-digit number or whatever, you wouldn't be able to do it. But if I said it's your phone number plus 1, you would be able to do it because presumably you already remember your phone number, and so you're building off a similar thing that's already in your long-term memory. Those are the only 3 ways to learn things. And consistency is basically repetition. So if you're not actually being consistent and continually exposing your brain to information you want to learn, your brain doesn't accept it as important. Like you can't traumatize yourself to learn a language. So basically your main option is consistency and repetition. And yeah, it's amazing. Like obviously I've done this as well when I was more of a new language learner, but people get so frustrated that they're not actually making progress in a language when in reality they haven't done it enough. They haven't put in their 200 hours. They haven't done the same thing through rope learning. So of course their brain doesn't accept it as important. And imagine if your brain didn't need consistency or any of those things to actually learn things. It'd be full of useless shit. If you didn't actually need consistency to be able to put something into your long-term memory, you'd literally have every single thing you did throughout your entire day in your long-term memory. Think about how much stuff you'd have in your head. If your brain was a hard drive, it would literally explode. So it's reasonable. That's the only way you can have things in your long-term memory, really, is to continually do it. I guess the third thing I said about how similarity kind of applies to easy languages. For example, languages like Italian, Spanish, Norwegian are easier than languages like Chinese like Mandarin, just because they're more similar to English if you're a native English speaker. And so because they're more similar, there's more of a neural connection, we'll say. So that can kind of apply as well. But the main thing is consistency. So currently you very likely don't have the skills to maintain consistency. I know I'm still working on it. I've made very, very good progress, which you'll see later in this video. But you probably don't have the skills to maintain consistency. It's not your fault. It's a lot of Western conditioning, but that's a video for another time. But yeah, that is why improving at a skill is so difficult, particularly language learning, because you are unable to be consistent. And even though you might think you know what consistency is, I need to explain it to you and walk you through it in this video for you to actually understand. So that is why it's important out of the way. We're halfway, maybe not time-wise, but you can see how long. I'm just getting a drink of water. If you're still here, by the way, you're definitely, I think I said at the start, a top 1% thinker and intellectual, just because people just watch so much crap. And like they would rather watch YouTube shorts and things that don't actually help them. This video is packed with value, and it's only going to get better. So let's talk about the third thing, what actually causes your inconsistency. And this is where it gets interesting, and I think you'll agree. So there are three main reasons I've identified that cause you to be inconsistent in a language. They make you like take days off, not want to keep going. They make you like, they interrupt your plans for when you're going to language learning, that kind of thing. They just make it inconsistent and choppy with your language learning. So the three reasons are a lack of motivation, in air quotes, is actually a lack of discipline. The second reason is you have a fixed mindset. You have a fixed mindset, which you probably already know what that means, but we'll talk about it a bit more later. And you're disorganized is the third reason. So learning how these three issues contribute to inconsistency is, in my opinion, the first step to actually destroying your inconsistency and becoming a more consistent person. So all of these, I've also written, all of these contribute to an early death of your goal. This is just a fun little picture. You've got your goal dies, and then these are the three things that are killing it. Cool, don't need to talk about that anymore. So the first thing, lack of motivation / discipline. It's pretty obvious, I think, if you don't feel like language learning or anything, like you don't feel like going to the gym, you don't feel like doing X, Y, or Z, we do our best as human beings to just avoid things we don't want to do. We take what's called the path of least resistance. So if you don't feel like doing something, unless it's like essential like work, it's highly likely that you'll just avoid it. If you can survive without doing it, you'll probably put off something you don't want to do. And that's just the way we operate it as people. We only really do things we're motivated to do. Unfortunately, the reality is that even if you really, really want something, you really want to learn a language, maybe it's for a family member, maybe you're on the clock for work and you need to learn a language so you can go work in another country, or you want to leave a crap job, anything like that. Even if you really, really want to do something, you will still have days where you just don't feel like it. Sometimes you're just tired, sometimes you've got other problems, sometimes you're too busy, and sometimes you just don't feel like it. Like, I can't even give you a reason. You just don't feel like learning a language or whatever. And the reality with that is that if you only learn when you feel like it, even if you do feel like it most of the time, which I think most people don't, you will get basically zero consistency, because you'll be taking days off here and there, and your progress will be choppy. You'll go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You'll take a small amount. You move like 10 centimeters out of the quicksand and then get sucked back in because you stopped climbing. You rested for a little bit. So the reason that this is happening is because you are not used to doing things that you don't feel like doing. And this is why we need to build something called discipline. I have a really, really good picture that I love showing that will really help you understand this on the next slide. But yeah, if you don't have discipline, you're basically not going to make consistent progress, which of course means you're not going to make really very good progress because you don't study even when you don't feel like it. So just a quick note as well. When I say discipline, sometimes it gets a bad rap. Discipline, as it's kind of talked about on social media, half the time is crap. So when I say discipline, I'll define it properly in a second, but I'm not talking about like forcing yourself to do really hard things you hate. I'm just saying you sometimes don't feel like doing something, and learning to actually do things you don't feel like doing, even when they're good for you, is a skill, and we'll talk about that more later. I also want you to look around you again. Look at those people that we talked about before that gave up on their habits. They're all incredibly undisciplined. It's highly likely. And I think most people are very, very undisciplined. If you actually take stock of your friend group and your family and just people with the exception of like athletes, high-level entrepreneurs, the military, a few other skilled professions, and a handful of people, maybe even some politicians, maybe, who knows. Most people are incredibly undisciplined. They don't work when they don't feel like it. And that's because of, Western conditioning. We have soft, easy lives. We don't need to be disciplined. It's not like we need to go kill a boar anymore or our whole tribe will die. But yeah, that's we could get into a whole nother thing. But yeah, if you don't do stuff, I've already mentioned that. So let's keep going. You understand the point. So this is the picture I wanted to show you. I call it the progress engine. It's basically how you go from wanting something, for example, to getting the result. So we have on the left side 1 and 2. This is our fuel. We have the engine and we have the result, which with what comes out of the engine. So basically, if we were to put this into language learning, we want to learn a language. So we start here. We either have motivation, as in we feel like language learning, or we have discipline, so we're going to force ourselves to language learn even when we don't feel like it. This is fuel. It fuels your action. So what you do to make progress, it could be flashcards, it could be reading, it could be listening to a podcast, etc. It could be talking to someone. And then the result is you improve at the language, or you get whatever result was of the action. So if you feel like studying, you do some flashcards, the result might be you memorize some words. This is the only way you get results in anything. You're either motivated to do it or you force yourself to do it when you don't feel like it. There's no third option. You do the actions and then you get the result of whatever your actions are. Here is the problem, and this is where the picture gets even more fun. So we had the engine before. I've done a few annotations to show you how most people actually work. So this 100% and this 0% is what fuel source people rely on. These two things are the fuel source. They fuel the engine. If you don't have any fuel at all, you have no reason to do something. If you're, say for example, you don't want to go to the gym, you don't feel like it, and you have zero discipline, you're not going to go to the gym because you have no fuel. So even if the result you wanted was to get strong and the action was go to the gym, you have no fuel. So you can cross out these two things. It's not going to happen. The thing that happens is most people, as we said before, have no discipline. They rely on it 0% and they rely 100% on motivation. These red numbers here, the percentage, is how much they rely on something. They rely 100% on motivation. So because they have zero discipline, we can basically cross that out anyway because it's never going to apply. And then they rely 100% on motivation. So if they do feel like doing something like language learning, they have that motivation fuel source, great. That goes into the engine. They do the actions like whatever they feel like doing, reading, watching a video of someone explaining something, and they get the result. Here's the problem. You're not motivated all the time, and we're going to talk about that in a second. Motivation is inherently random. You can't control when you feel like doing something, and a lot of the time, you're not actually motivated. Sometimes for long periods of times, like 1 to 2 weeks. That might not seem like that long of a period of time, but with language learning, that can be significant in you forgetting stuff. So if you rely 100% on motivation and it doesn't apply, obviously we just talked about discipline doesn't apply. You have zero fuel sources when you don't have motivation, and that means that you don't do any actions, which means you get no result. And that is how you fail at language learning. And that is how you have no consistency, because you're basically just not going to do anything when you don't feel like it. So here is a little calendar explaining what happens when you have no discipline. So if we're this person here and we rely 0% on discipline, here is basically what it looks like. The smiley faces, you felt like it. The sad faces, you don't. So as you can see on this calendar, on days 1, 5, and 8, we had the smiley face. We felt like language learning, great. We had motivation, so we were able to do the actions and make progress. On every single other day, we didn't feel like it, which meant we did nothing. Because we could cross out motivation, no fuel source, we did nothing. By the way, if you have any questions, comment down below and I'll help explain things to you. But yeah. So yeah, out of the 9 days, on 3 of the days, we actually did something, and that was only because we felt like it in the moment. We still wanted to learn a language, but we just didn't feel like doing anything. We were undisciplined. That is what it looks like for most people, and oftentimes worse. They take massive breaks off just because they don't feel like doing something. Here is the alternative, and I'll show you this before we go back to this green calendar here. But the alternative is to change your fuel efficiency. So if we're relying 100% on motivation, as soon as we cross out motivation, we can't do stuff. That's straightforward. We need to change our fuel efficiency. We need to move away from motivation as the main fuel source towards discipline. So if we change from motivation to discipline, say you were magically a 100% disciplined person, you would always language learn. It wouldn't matter if you felt like it because you're not even relying on motivation. Now that's unrealistic because nobody's going to be 100% disciplined. So here is what you basically need to do. You need to over time move more and more towards discipline and away from motivation. Motivation isn't a bad thing per se. It's actually a good thing. Motivation is kind of like, I think you should view motivation as kind of like a treat. That's why I put a lollipop there. If you feel like language learning, great. If you feel like doing any kind of hard goal that you set yourself, great. It'll be easy, it'll be fun. But sometimes it's not. And what happens is when you don't feel like doing something, as I've said before, you'll just quit. So you need to move towards discipline as the main fuel source. And of course, say we have discipline as the main fuel source and we're unmotivated. Before we just cross out motivation, we have no fuel, we do nothing. Now we cross out motivation. Imagine it's crossed out because today we don't feel like it. Well, guess what? We have discipline as our backup fuel source. That is there to fuel our actions in our engine, and we can still make progress. You don't feel like doing flashcards, for example, but we're going to be disciplined and we're going to do it anyway. And then you can enjoy yourself afterwards because guess what? You have the result. You're better at those words. So here is what it looks like when you're a disciplined person on the calendar. Same situation, days 3, 5, and 8, we felt like doing it, so we didn't even need to use discipline on those days. But see, on these sad days here where before we didn't feel like doing it, so we did nothing, now we're actually using discipline. So I've used the brain who's doing some powerlifting with some incredible form, I will add. That's a very heavy weight. He's doing a 3-plate, whatever that is, shoulder press. Wow. This is the, sorry, I got distracted. This is basically what it looks like to be disciplined. So you don't feel like doing something, but you do it anyway. So on days 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, those 5 days, well, before we had 5 days of nothing, now we have 5 days of actually making progress because we had discipline. And then I put on day 9, you just didn't do anything because you didn't feel like it, because you're not perfect, but you get the picture. That is an example of you doing the thing that you didn't feel like doing and still making progress. So you can see 8 out of 9 is way better than 3 out of 9. But yeah, that is basically why people stop being consistent. That's one main reason, because they don't have motivation and they're completely undisciplined. We need to move away from motivation as a primary fuel source, and we'll talk about that in the 4th part of this video where we talk about how to actually boost your consistency. I'm just getting a drink of water because this is a lot of talking. Number 2 out of 3 reasons why you're being inconsistent: fixed mindset. So you've probably heard the words fixed mindset and growth mindset before. If you haven't, I'm just going to really quickly define them. So these two mindsets are basically how you see progress and results. The fixed mindset is basically that results come from talent, luck, and your intelligence is fixed. So you basically can't change your skill level. You can't improve at anything if you try. Anyone who pretends they can is just lying, they're a scammer, or they have some kind of natural talent that you don't have. That is completely untrue. The growth mindset is actually what's true, and the growth mindset is basically the idea that results and, results and ability, skill, everything like that, intelligence, comes from the effort you invest. So you have complete control over your skill through your actions. If you choose to become better at something, you can become better by putting in effort. And that is of course true. You can become better by putting in effort. Here is the problem though. Most people have a fixed mindset, and I'm sure you'll agree with that. Most people generally don't think that they don't believe in themselves. They don't think they can actually become more intelligent. Like, they think they can learn some things. You can learn to tie your own shoes if you're an adult. For whatever reason, you don't know how to do that. But like, they see language learning and difficult things like, maybe going to the gym. I bring up the gym a lot just because I like doing it. But yeah, they see difficult things as like impossible to achieve, just because they just don't believe in themselves. They don't see results as the product of the effort they put in. They see results as the product of talent and luck. And it's so damaging. And here's what actually happens when you have the fixed mindset. I'll give you a metaphor with fuel in a second. But basically, people that don't see action as valuable just don't put in any effort. So imagine you don't see effort as valuable at all with language learning. Why would you put in effort when you don't feel like it? It just doesn't make any sense. If you want to learn a language but you don't see putting in effort as actually important, you just won't do it, which means you're going to be inconsistent. Whereas the person with the growth mindset who does see results as the product of the effort they put in, even if they don't feel like it, they're going to be more incentivized to put in effort, because they know every time they sit down, do some language learning, put some effort in, they're going to get that little bit further. So I'll give you a metaphor with fuel. Imagine you have a car. How do you actually get the car to drive? Of course, you need to put fuel in it or it's not going to drive. The reason you put fuel in a car, and just stay with me on this, is because you know that fuel actually helps the car drive. Otherwise, you wouldn't waste time going to the petrol station. You wouldn't waste money buying fuel. That's the reason you do those things, because you understand that fuel has a purpose. Imagine that you don't see fuel as being important anymore. Imagine that you don't see petrol as actually being the thing that helps your car go. Why would you bother wasting your time and wasting your money to go fill up your car? Because it's not important anymore. You just wouldn't do it anymore. Obviously, the truth is that your car wouldn't drive without fuel. But if you just imagine magically you didn't think fuel was important, you just wouldn't actually try. you wouldn't even fill the car up with fuel anymore. And that is exactly the same as the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. If you don't see effort as important, you just won't do it anymore. And then what happens is you don't have any fuel in the car, you won't drive, you don't put any effort in, you don't make any progress. And of course, you're inconsistent because if you don't feel like it, you're just not going to put in any effort. So the reason I think a lot of people have a fixed mindset is it's conditioned by social media. We only see the results of things, not the process. So you see, as I mentioned before, you see the fast car, you see the money, you see, you know what I mean. You've been on social media. You don't see what the people actually put in to get that. Either they're lying, which is quite common, or they're telling the truth, but you don't see how many hours of study Ollie Richards put in to learn 8 different languages. You just see the fact that he does it. And so everyone will either say, well, most people will just have a fixed mindset looking at that and go, I just can't do it. Whereas in reality, you don't actually see all of the effort they put in to get there. So yeah, that is basically why a fixed mindset is destructive. But let me show you in a picture form as well. So this is what I call the grind. It's basically how you go from, we talked about how to learn skills before. This is just how you get good at something, full stop. So we're going to talk about language learning in general. You go from not being able to speak the language to being able to speak the language. But this is basically the process. So you can't do something, but you have a growth mindset. You understand that you can actually get better at it by putting in time and effort. So of course, you want to learn a language, you put in time and effort, you get results over time, those results stack up until eventually you have enough results, you have enough skills in that language that you can say, yeah, I speak the language. That is what the grind looks like. Here is the problem, and I'll put a circle around it. Fixed mindset. A lot of people have a fixed mindset, and so they start off, they can't do something, same as in the previous picture, but instead of believing in themselves that they can actually get better at it by putting in time and effort, they have a fixed mindset. And because they have a fixed mindset, they see no value to time and effort, which means they don't put any time and effort in, which means they don't get any results, which means they have no results to stack up, and they can never say they can actually do the skill. This red picture here is the reality for most people. They have a fixed mindset, and so they go nowhere. That is the problem. And I put it into a consistency calendar as well for you to actually look at. So day 1, we were motivated, then we had a fixed mindset and we didn't believe effort was important anymore, so we just did nothing. Here is the opposite here. You can basically understand what that means. The point with this is that if you don't see effort as important and you have a fixed mindset and you think that you're not actually going to make any progress for putting in effort in, you'll naturally take the path of least resistance and avoid any kind of discomfort when you don't feel like language learning. And that is going to make you inconsistent as a learner. But yeah, that is basically the fixed mindset explained. Now we're on to reason number 3, which is disorganization. Getting another drink of water. So even if you are disciplined, say you're a disciplined learner, you're going to learn even when you don't feel like it, and you have a growth mindset, you believe progress is possible. Disorganization is a huge kind of wrench in the engine, like throwing a wrench in the engine, it kind of breaks the whole thing. Being organized basically means being prepared to achieve your goals. So for example, if you set a goal like, I'm going to, be in better shape, I'm going to be stronger. Your organization might be, I'm going to set aside 3 times a week to go to the gym. That would be an example of being organized. Same applies with literally anything. Pause the video and give yourself an example right now of a goal and then how you could be organized for that. That is literally what organization means. Unfortunately, most people are very disorganized with their language learning. They have a rough goal, like they want to speak the language because they think it's cool or whatever, but they don't actually set themselves a plan to achieve that goal. So some people actually don't have goals as well, I will say. If you don't have language learning goals, if you don't have a system to achieve them, and I'm going to explain all of this in a second, by the way, if you don't have a system to achieve them, like a habit tracker or whatever, you don't have a schedule, you don't have quotas, you're literally a feather in the wind. You're going to only do some work when you feel like it, and it's going to be shoddy work. It's not going to be you getting anywhere. And you're just a feather in the wind. You blow around as you feel like it, and when you have time, and you don't make any actual progress, you're not consistent. And that's just not what we're going to be. We don't want to be a feather in the wind. We want to become a stone, basically. So take a look at this. This is a picture I've put of, we talked about the grind before with the fixed mindset. I put it into a different kind of way of how you would actually make results. So for example, we start with a goal, something we want to achieve. It might be, I want to learn Italian, for example. I want to learn Italian within 2 years, we'll say is the goal. Then we set ourselves a system. We say, okay, I've made this habit tracker. I'm going to listen to one vlog in Italian every single day. I'm going to do flashcards 3 days a week, and I'm going to read one chapter of a book every single week. Just as a random example. That doesn't have to be your system. You commit to this system by planning it into your schedule. Obviously, I said you make a habit tracker, you do the work and you get results. That is an example of an organized grind. You have a goal, you set yourself a system, you followed it and you get the results. Here is what most people have, which is a disorganized grind. So when I say disorganized, I mean the opposite of organized. They haven't set themselves. Look at our definition of organized, being prepared to achieve goals. They're unprepared to achieve goals. They've set themselves a shoddy goal with a shoddy system or no system, which basically means they're only gonna do stuff when they feel like it and they have zero plan. They're just gonna do what they feel like doing that makes them think they're actually making progress. So they set themselves a second-rate goal. Instead of saying, I wanna learn Italian by this point in time for this reason, they're just like, yeah, I kind of like this, I'm just going to kind of mess around in Italian or whatever. They don't set themselves a system, so they have no habit tracker or actual plan for learning the language. They have no resources saved. They've subscribed to no YouTubers that explain things or anything like that. They just kind of, do some watching videos or whatever when they feel like it. And then of course, they're going to be inconsistent. They have low quality, inconsistent work because they have no actual plan and they get weak results in the language, which basically means you get nowhere. So here is what that looks like in a calendar. If you're a disorganized person, the brain is going to basically be the brain is going to be, what have I got here? Sorry, the brain is going to be, you had like a peaceful, what have I got here? The brain is going to be, you had like you had nothing on that day. Sorry, I just had a complete mind back. The brain is going to be, you had nothing on that day. And so you didn't actually really need to be organized. You could kind of just do stuff. So as you can see on days 1, 6, and 7, we had the brain and we had enough time to basically do stuff. Every day we see this guy with the business thing sweating. That was a day that we were busy and we were disorganized. So because we were disorganized, we got nothing done. If we look at this graph over here where we're organized, as we can see on days 2, 3, 4, days 2, 3, and 4, where we had the businessman who was stressed before, we weren't organized. In this event, we actually are organized, and I put the calendar there. This isn't a very good graph, I'm sorry. But yeah, basically, the calendar is there to represent the fact that we were organized, and so we were able to work around the fact that we were busy. We were I'm not going to continue talking about this. I hate this graph already. This is a terrible graph. The point is, if you're disorganized and you have no plan, you're going to bounce around like a feather in the wind and you're not actually going to make any solid progress. And so you need a strict plan. We're going to talk about that right now. Onto the most important part of the video, how to actually boost your consistency in language learning. I'm just going to get a drink real quick. By the way, guys, I'll just mention at this point, I've got links in my description to a bunch of different things like my Discord, which I'd highly recommend you jump in. I'll have all of the videos I think are relevant linked in the description as well. I will have some other explanations linked in the description. I'll have any further reading I want you to look at linked in the description. And yeah, I definitely recommend you check out my website and my Discord. It's super valuable. The Discord especially because we have a whole language learning community, but yeah. So how to boost your consistency. Now that we understand there are 3 major killers of consistency, we can talk about how to actually get rid of these things and how to improve your consistency. Boosting your consistency is basically destroying any handbrakes that are making you inconsistent and then utilizing useful tools that are going to turn you into a consistent person. So let's discuss basically how you can upgrade your consistency. There are 5 main things that we're going to do, and this is a picture. If you want to pause it and have a look at it, you can, but I'm just going to go through all of these things. So number 1, systems the foundation. If you remember from a few minutes ago, which you probably don't because you're using your short-term memory as we've established, I mentioned systems in the organized grind. Systems are basically, if you've heard of the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, you'll probably know a little bit about systems, but a system is basically a method you use to make progress or achieve a goal. So we have a goal. We want to learn Italian. We set ourselves a system, which might be do these tasks on a weekly basis. Maybe we're going to look at flashcards every single day, or whatever habits we want to set ourselves. That is a system that we've put in place to achieve our goal. A bad system means you don't have a solid way of achieving your goal. If you don't really set yourself clear tasks, you're not really setting yourself up to actually improve towards your goal, and you're disorganized, as we talked about before. And then of course, no system is even worse because you're just you're basically running on hope as your way of getting towards your goal. So you need to set yourself an efficient and achievable system to hold your consistency. Efficient basically means the system you're setting yourself actually gets you towards something. So if you wanted to lose weight, for example, and you set yourself the system of being lazy and eating junk food, that would be an example of an inefficient system, because although you've set yourself a system, it's obviously not going to work. It's not going to take you there. You need to set yourself an efficient system. If you set yourself the goal of, doing exercise, eating healthy and eating less, that would be an example of an efficient system for losing weight, because it actually takes you towards the goal. With language learning, we want to make sure we're setting ourselves a system that is actually going to help us become better at the language. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about that in a second. Achievable basically means not setting yourself a ridiculously hard system. So if you set yourself 30 tasks to do on a daily basis, you're going to do 6 hours of reading, you're going to do 10 hours of watching vlogs. That's obviously silly. It's not achievable. So make sure the system you're setting yourself is actually something you can tick off and actually go through every single day. We'll talk about that a bit more with habit trackers, but that is basically going to hold you consistent, that you actually have a system and a plan to make progress. And this is the foundation. People often talk about, what's better, goals or systems. They say systems over goals. That's total bullshit. It's systems and goals. You need both of these things. You need a goal in the future to move towards, and you need a system that's actually going to take you there. So for example, if your goal is to speak Italian, your system as a beginner might be study 3 times a week, do 1 set of flashcards daily, etc., anything like this. And I mentioned habit trackers a little bit. We're going to talk about them now if you don't know what they are. But habit trackers are basically a way of tracking, like you set yourselves goals and you can tick them off on a daily basis. I'll show you a picture. But yeah, habit trackers are super useful. And yeah, don't be afraid to have your system evolve over time. So as a beginner, you might start off with literally doing like 10 flashcards a day. And then after a year of learning that language, you might be reading a chapter a day, listening to a podcast in the gym, and doing like 2 other things, because over time you've actually improved your system. So here is an example of a habit tracker. Habit tracker is basically something that you have. This is a good picture of one. You basically have a series of habits. So we're going to obviously do a language learning one. This one's got like lift weights, go to sleep on time, go for a walk, read, etc. And you basically have all the habits down the side, and you have the days at the top. So you can have like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You can have like your whole week, and you literally just color in the box or tick off the ones you do, so you can hold yourself consistent and make sure you're not actually not doing things you're supposed to be doing. I have a picture of my habit tracker a little bit later in the video, which I'll show you. But basically, habit trackers are king. They hold you consistent, and yeah, they're super useful. As far as the habits go, you need to make sure your habits are high ROI. High ROI basically means high return on investment, so they're useful for your skill. As we talked about before, if you set yourself like, if you're trying to lose weight and you set yourself like I'm gonna eat junk food and be lazy, those are examples of just, zero ROI habits. They don't give you any return on investment. Doing them doesn't get you anywhere near your goal. We wanna set habits that actually give us the highest return on investment and get us the closest towards the goal we're trying to achieve. So examples of high ROI language learning habits that you could set yourself on a daily basis are, for example, input, so reading and listening, basically consuming content. You could be reading books, you could be listening to podcasts or watching vlogs, you could even watch TV and movies if you're more advanced, you can read the news, etc. Output is basically you're producing content. So you're either writing, you can do this through journaling, for example, or you're speaking to someone, which I think is the best thing to do, but obviously you can't always do that. Educational content, so studying, you could be reading a website guide on something, you could be taking notes, you could be having a native speaker explain problems to you or topics within the language. I guess textbooks as well, but textbooks are kind of, physical textbooks are a little bit more inefficient because you can get them online. And textbooks would count as well. And then repetition, of course, with flashcards is a high ROI habit as well. Anything that isn't on the screen is probably not useful. You're welcome to comment down below and tell me if you think you have something that is useful, and I will judge it. Some people like to have win stacking in their habit tracker, which is great. It basically means having you have a notes section on your phone where you put like one win of the day. So you say, I didn't feel like doing flashcards, but I did it anyway. And you can go back and look through it and see all of the things you did over time and basically be proud of yourself. So yeah, things like that can also be useful, but these things are the main habits we want to have in our habit tracker. I'd highly recommend you check out my full video on habit trackers, because habit trackers are king. This is super, super useful for maintaining consistency. But yeah, boosted mindset. All right, so we talked about how a fixed mindset before is basically contributing to you not actually making any progress in the language. And the reality, I think, is the truth is the growth mindset. The growth mindset is correct. Results are the product of the effort you put in. If you don't put in any effort, you're not going to get anywhere. And yeah, natural talent can take you only so far, but it's basically crap. If you don't actually put effort into learning a language, you're not going to get anywhere. I've never seen someone apart from their native language, not try and learn a language and accidentally learn it. It just doesn't happen. I could put you in the country, and I think if I put you in, like, say, Russia, for example, and you didn't speak any Russian, you're an English speaker, and you literally just didn't try at all to learn Russian, you would literally pick up some words, but you would never be fluent. Even in 50 years of being there, I don't think you would be conversational at all. I genuinely don't think you would. If you just didn't try at all, you somehow were able to live your life without actually conversing with people, you would never be fluent. It literally just wouldn't happen. You might disagree with me on that. I don't think you would be fluent if you literally just didn't try ever to learn a language. So you need to understand that putting in effort is directly linked to the progress you make in a language. And if you actually want to be motivated as well, you have to believe this. As we talked about before, if you don't see effort as actually useful for making progress, you're just not going to put anything in. When you do see effort as actually useful for getting you closer towards your goal, you will be more motivated to put in effort, because you understand effort is basically like me. I'm basically trading my time to become better at something, and that is obviously worth it because you want to learn a language. So the best thing I think you can do to build a growth mindset, if you have a fixed mindset, is to basically do a few things. So cut out all the crap. There's a lot of weakness conditioning, I find, that gives people fixed mindset. So if you're on social media, or you're on Instagram or whatever, and you see all this cool stuff people have and you don't see the actual process they went through to get it, that is kind of reinforcing a fixed mindset, because you're seeing the result, you're not seeing the process, when all you're exposed to is the results of people's hard work and you never actually see the effort they put in. It kind of puts into your brain that these people, they just have something. You're kind of just programmed to think they just have this stuff, and because I don't have this stuff and I don't see them actually working together, I'm just going to assume they had it naturally and I can't actually do it. That's crap. Anyone who has anything that isn't lying had to work hard for it, basically. And yeah, so I'd recommend you avoid any language learning channels. There's one channel, I think it's called like Xiaoming's or something. He's actually got a fair amount of subscribers. I've put him in some of my thumbnails as an example of, stupid YouTubers. But basically his thumbnails are like, I learned a language in 12 hours. I learned a language in 24 hours. I presume there's always some kind of catch, because he obviously didn't do that and he's not going to pretend he did. But that's just, videos like that are just nonsense. They're designed for you to watch them and then actually get views. Because I think something you need to understand about social media, if you don't already, is that the creators on there want views. Like, even I want views. I want people to watch this video, but I'm going to put as much value in it as possible and hope that people see the value and watch it. A lot of people try and cheat on social media, and basically they put things in the thumbnail that aren't actually true, a bunch of crap, things that aren't actually useful, and of course, you don't get anywhere watching that. So it reinforces your fixed mindset. I'd also recommend you cut out shorts, cut out any social media, cut out anything that makes you feel like you're wasting your time or giving you frustration and anxiety with language learning. The second thing I think is to set yourself basically a small period of time, it could be like 2 days, to literally just go all out with language learning. So ideally if you're feeling motivated right now, do it now. If you're not really feeling 100% motivated, maybe just wait a little bit, because you're going to try and go all out. You're basically going to set yourself a bunch of things and you're just going to do it. And then at the end of the 2 days, you're going to look back and see that you actually made a stupid amount of progress. If you're used to doing basically nothing, really, you're kind of inconsistent with language learning, and you take a small period of like 48 hours, for example, just to do, like, you're going to read 3 chapters a day, you're going to do 300 flash, like just go all out, literally do as much as you can, like over a weekend, and then look back and see how much progress you made. That'll give you a growth mindset, because you'll just see how much progress you actually make when you put effort in. The third thing I'd recommend to boost your mindset is basically to win stack. So we mentioned this before, literally go into notes on your phone, open a new notes document, name it WinStack. Every single day, you're going to put the date in of the day. Like, you're going to put like Monday, the 16th of July, or the 16th, whatever, just any date, whatever the day is, and literally put in one or a few wins of the day. So for example, it can be like, I did flashcards even when I didn't feel like it. I understand this difficult grammar concept. I talked to that person at the checkout who I heard they had an accent, and I just asked them politely if they were from the country that I'm learning the language, and I just tried talking to them. That was good. Things like that. You can even do wins that aren't to do with language learning, just for your overall confidence and mental health. But yeah, to do with language learning, that's really good to look back on and to hold consistency, because you'll see this massive history of you just doing things that made you proud, and you won't actually want to give up, and that'll reinforce your growth mindset and boost your consistency. So yeah, you should have a notebook as a language learner, and when you're When you have a notebook, obviously you're going to use it for note taking and journaling, etc. You can flick back and just look at the stuff you were doing like 2 months ago, for example, and you can just see how bad you were previously when you were writing. And then you go towards now and you're like, oh, I'm actually really, really good compared to that. And so that kind of reinforces your growth mindset as well, because you see, well, 2 months have gone by and I've made like so much progress. You can see, I look at all these mistakes I've made that I didn't realize I was making. And yeah, that reinforces your growth mindset because you understand that you have made a lot of progress. In the short of it, boosting growth mindset does give you a lot of motivation because you understand that effort is tied to progress. You want to make progress, so you put in effort, which means you make progress. So yeah, and this will also hold you consistent because you're motivated to learn. And yeah, that's basically all there is for boosting your mindset. The third thing we're going to talk about is building discipline. And this is a huge one because everyone is completely, utterly so undisciplined. People just do not do things they don't feel like doing. They only do things when they feel like doing. And that is why I think most people in like Western countries, they literally just get nowhere with any goal. They never do anything they don't feel like doing. I think it actually contributes to a lot of poor mental health because people chase what's called instant gratification. If you haven't heard of instant gratification and delayed gratification, instant gratification is basically things that give you dopamine straight away. So for example, junk food, social media, literally think of anything that makes you feel good straight away. Like drugs is an extreme example, but we're not going to go there. Just things that give you dopamine and make you feel good straight away, but aren't necessarily good for you long term. And then there's delayed gratification, which is things that are kind of difficult now, like exercise, eating healthy, studying, putting in effort into a passion project, etc. That are not necessarily, they can sometimes be fun. They're not necessarily always good now, but they will make you feel better in the future. Sleep is a big one as well. And I think people without discipline are unable to prioritize delayed gratification. They need the thing that feels comfortable now. And so that actually gives them kind of poor mental health because they can only do things they feel like doing. That's what they sleep deprive themselves, they eat unhealthy, etc. It's a really negative spiral to be in. But yeah, back onto actually boosting your discipline as a language learner. I just want you to be honest with yourself. Sometimes you might say that you're busy. Sometimes you do have time to learn. You could have listened to a podcast while you were cooking. You could have done flashcards that, half an hour you had spare. You could have read one page before bed, but you just chose not to. Like, I know people are busy, but just be honest. There are times where you could language learn and you should, but you just choose not to. And the reason is obviously lack of discipline, and we need to fix this by building stronger discipline. Discipline is basically built through reps. I want you to think of discipline is kind of like a muscle. If we think about the gym, if you just do one set of like an exercise, you don't get bigger muscles, you don't get stronger. You need to actually do things continuously and your body understands, okay, I need to get stronger, so I'm gonna get bigger and stronger. That is kind of how you build your discipline. If you don't ever do anything you don't feel like doing, you're never going to build your discipline. What you need to do is pick one thing that you don't normally do that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone and just do it. So for example, one rep might be, you're going to set yourself one task, like for example, 10 flashcards. Say you never do flashcards, you hate doing flashcards. You set yourself the task today, I'm literally just going to do 10 flashcards. That's not even that difficult. You could probably force yourself to do that, even if you have really bad discipline. So you're going to do 10 flashcards, or you're going to watch one vlog, and then you just do it, and then you tick it off. So you've set yourself a task that's out of your comfort zone, and you've done it and ticked it off, and now you can congratulate yourself. What's actually happened behind the scenes is that you've done something you didn't actually feel like doing because you understood that it was important for making progress. And what this does is it teaches your brain that, hey, we actually can do things we don't feel like doing if they're good for us. And then from there, you basically do a thing called progressive overload, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But progressive overload is basically you increase the difficulty and the amount over time. So if you set yourself 10 flashcards, tomorrow you can set yourself 12, and then the day after you can set yourself 15, etc. You literally just keep going over time with the tasks that you're setting yourselves. So yeah, I want you to congratulate yourself, by the way, if you do this. And yeah, you will build discipline over time. And then when you have discipline, of course, you have more consistency because you don't only language learn when you feel like it. You'll language learn when you don't feel like it, when you still want to learn a language, but when you don't feel like it, you'll still force yourself to do one thing, even if it's just 10 flashcards. And that's super good. So there's a common misconception it's bad to do work when you don't feel like it, when you don't feel like doing it. This isn't true. So the reason this isn't true is because you actually do feel like learning a language in the long term, you just don't emotionally feel like it in the present. This is the difference between long-term and short-term motivation. So if you think about it, you always have long-term motivation to learn a language. If I said I could snap my fingers and you'd be able to speak this language, you'd obviously agree to that because you still want to do it. Whereas if I said something like useless, if I said I'm going to snap my fingers and there's going to be like a hole dug in your backyard, you don't actually want that probably. So you wouldn't even want that if I could give it to you for free, but you would take language learning. And that is because even if you don't feel like doing it right now, you do want to learn a language. Unfortunately, you don't have short-term motivation because you don't emotionally feel like doing it in the moment. So I want you to ask yourself, is it better to obey your short-term motivation or your long-term motivation? Is it better to do only things you feel like, or is it better to do things that you actually desire in the long term, even when you don't feel like it, so you can make progress? The answer is pretty clear. I don't think I need to say it, but it's following your long-term motivation. So when we're disciplined, we're not actually doing things we don't want to do. We do want to do them, we just don't feel them right now. And that is why we don't feel like them right now, and that is why discipline is so important. And like, if you didn't want to get better at language learning, you wouldn't be watching this video after 55 minutes or however long it's been going on for. So yeah, building discipline is incredibly important. Don't underestimate it. And I'd highly recommend you check out my full-length videos on motivation and discipline. I'll have them in the description. Guys, we're close to the end, but stick with me. So number 4 is organized learning. We've already talked about habit trackers and we've talked about disorganization, but here's the thing. Ideally, you've already set yourself a habit tracker, but we can do better than that. I think a lot of people are just really disorganized in their lives, and this isn't even just language learning, this is just general life. They kind of bounce around like a feather in the wind. I don't know any feathers that bounce around, blow around like a feather in the wind, and they don't actually have goals, they don't have set plans to achieve those goals, they got nothing. So what you actually need is a calendar. If you don't already have a calendar, I'd highly recommend, just as a life productivity tool, you have a calendar where you can put in your work, you can put in any events you have on, haircuts, etc., just anything like that. Chuck that in the calendar. That'll give you a good solid idea of what you have on each day. I just recommend that, not even for language learning, but that's just the first thing. Make sure you have a calendar. And then I'd recommend you set your specific habits into times of the day. So if you already have a habit tracker, which you should have, or you're gonna make it after this video, I'd highly recommend you try your best to kind of set the habits into times of the day. So for example, if your habit tracker is 2 habits, you're gonna read you're gonna read a few pages or a chapter of a book, and you're going to do flashcards. You might do the flashcards at 10 a.m. and you might do the chapter before bed to relax before you go to bed. That's just a random example. Having the actual habits set into the times of day is good for productivity, because not only are you holding yourself accountable with a habit tracker, but you actually have it set into periods of the day. So if you miss it, you know, okay, I'm a little bit behind. I need to set this as kind of an emergency task and make sure I'm doing it now. I'd also recommend this, probably, if you haven't seen my video on Eat the Frog, that is probably making you look at that and go, what the actual shit is that? Eat the Frog is actually a productivity technique. It basically means doing the hardest possible thing first. Like if you had to eat a frog at dinner, you'd probably do it first to get it out of the way. Eating the frog means doing the hardest thing first in the day. So as soon as you wake up, give yourself one win to start the day and just do something difficult. So do flashcards, or just, you know, do something that's useful. I won't go into it now, but definitely check out my video on that. It's actually super useful. It got a lot of views. So people obviously agreed with me on that, but yeah. Routine as well. I think people, if you don't have a calendar, you definitely don't have a routine, but having a routine is super important. There was a quote I heard once where it was like, what is a good life made of? Well, a good life is made of good years, obviously. Good years are made of good months. Good months are made of good weeks. Good weeks are made of good days. And a good day is made, it starts in the morning. So if you want to have a good life, you need to have a locked in morning routine. Ideally, you have the same kind of sleep schedule every single day. I know I personally don't at the moment, which really annoys me. I'm working on it just because I have, you know, stuff in my life that is on a rotating schedule, so I can't actually go to sleep at the same time. And that's really frustrating, but do your best to kind of go to sleep at the same time. Definitely try and get enough sleep if you can. I've been a bit sleep deprived lately, so I'm kind of hypocritical on that one, but anyway, that is important and I'm working on it. So yeah, make sure you have a routine for going to bed. Make sure you have a routine as a morning routine. I'll probably make a video on that, but yeah, routines are exceptionally important. Planning things into your day is exceptionally important, but yeah. And I'd also say make sure you record your work for the week. So if you have a habit tracker for language learning, obviously you can see which stuff you've ticked off, but yeah, have a look through once a week your journal and just see all the things you've done. Have a look through your video list and just see the videos you've watched and actually reflect on how much progress you put in, it'll definitely make you feel happy with yourself. But yeah, and all of this kind of organization does allow you to stay consistent without kind of getting too busy. Obviously, we all have days where, like, I've had days where I had to get up at like 4:30 for a 6 o'clock start and literally work through until like 9:15. So I'd bugger all the time. I had like breaks at work or whatever. And I had travel time between work, which doesn't really count because I can't read while I'm driving. So yeah, sometimes you do have days like that, but don't bullshit me and tell me that that's every single day. You know perfectly well you could be doing more. I could be doing more. I could be chucking on a podcast while I drive, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to plan on doing it. And the reason I tell you guys that is because I am honest. I'll tell you when I haven't done something. But yeah, here is a picture of my current habit tracker. So just to kind of give you a rough idea of habit trackers, this is kind of more of an advanced one than the one, where's the other one? There it is. This is kind of a more simple one. This is a more advanced one, but I'm basically just going to explain it to you. You can skip this part of the video if you want. I'm just going to explain my habit tracker. So the way I have my habit tracker set up is, first of all, the most important thing, which is the habit. So as you can see, I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, blah, 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 the whole week. And then I've also given myself a score, so I can put like 7 out of 7 if I got every single day for that habit, etc. You don't really need that. And then I've got my habits. I think a really important thing is, we've talked about having high ROI habits, but also the amount of habits you have is really important. If you have like 17 different habits you're doing, it's really hard to stay consistent with them, and you'll probably try and shortcut them. You won't do them properly. Having less habits is definitely good. I think 5 habits is a lot of habits to have personally. And I know for me personally, there's been times when I've had like 15 different habits. I'll try and find a picture and show you in a future video. But yeah, having a lot of habits is one of the easiest ways to screw yourself over. And then of course, when you continually miss habits, you actually get compounding dissatisfaction because you're like, okay, I'm not the shit anymore. I can't actually do all these things. What you need to do is get rid of some of the habits. So give yourself, I'd recommend as a beginner, if you want to set yourself one habit as a language learner, perfect. Definitely do not set yourself more than 3. You're allowed maximum 3 habits. If you've never had a habit tracker before, you are not allowed to set yourself more than 3 habits. I'm giving you that rule now. You can have a look at mine. I'm just getting a drink. 1 second. Sorry, we've been very thirsty in this video. I'm just doing a lot of talking. We're over an hour in. But yeah, we're close to finish. So don't set yourself more than 3. It's too much. If you want to set yourself 2 or even 1, perfect. Have 1 habit written down, do 1 deck of flashcards daily and do it right. Have 1 habit and do it right. That's way better than having 15 habits that you miss half of them and then you cheat the rest and you know what I mean. So also with your habit tracker is extremely important is what you're actually doing as your habits. You need to be specific. So for example, if you write flashcards as an example into your habit tracker, that's not really specific because it's like, how many flashcards do you need to do? Do you need to do 3 or do you need to do 150? How many decks do you need to do? Are you doing passive recall or active recall? If you don't know what those words mean, check out my video on flashcards. But the point is you need to be specific about what you're actually doing or you'll try and find ways to cheat the system. I know if I have, for example, as one of my habits, I'm going to watch a vlog. I'll watch something like, this doesn't really happen that much anymore because I'm more self-disciplined, but I'd watch like 20 seconds if I knew it was like getting late. And I was like, okay, well that counts and tick it off. And it's like, no, that's me coping. That's what we call copium. That's not actually you making progress. You've just kind of done the kind of crappy cheating version and then ticked it off. You need to be specific about what your actual habits are. So I'd recommend below your habit tracker, you can have like the habits in short form up here, but I'd recommend you have each habit written out and then you write the specific criteria for what the actual habit entails. So for example, take language learning. So I've got language learning written here, and then I've got, to tick off language learning as a habit, I need to complete 2 language learning tasks that I set myself. So, and I set them over here. So the tasks I can set myself are flashcards, reading, studying, speaking, and content. This is not a good example because I haven't written specifically how many flashcards I'm going to do. I have that saved in notes on my phone, which I haven't put a photo in, but yeah, I have specifically, I know what I need to do to actually set myself a task, so that's okay. If you don't have this written down, you're gonna try and cheat the system. So yeah, and then I've got other habits here. I only have 1 habit for language learning. The rest of my habits are like deep work is like YouTube, summer shred is the gym. If you wanna pause the video and have a look at my habit tracker, you can. You might not understand all of it because there's other stuff that's on different pages. But yeah, that's basically it. And then of course, I actually write the habits into my schedule. So This isn't my calendar. I have an actual calendar for like work, etc. But when I want to write in habits for each day, so for example, I have for Tuesday, my 2 deep work habits, which are for YouTube. I have record long form guide, which is this video, and record HQV, which is another video I need to record basically. And I'm going to tick them off as I go. This is like this week. That's why I haven't done most of these things. As you can see, yesterday on Monday, I did 3 of the things, and then these 2, I missed a few of the criteria. I ate 1 unhealthy thing, so I couldn't tick off the whole summer shred, and I missed one of my inventory tasks. If you have any questions about this, by the way, happy to explain how my habit tracker works. I would recommend you color code as well. But yeah, that's basically how my habit tracker works. I'd highly recommend you make yourself a habit tracker, give yourself a few very high ROI tasks, color code them and be specific about what you need to do, plan them into your schedule, put the habit tracker in plain view so you can't ignore it, tick them off. And yeah, jump in my Discord as well, because you can actually upload pictures of your habit tracker to stay consistent with other people. But yeah, here is a few other things. So this is an example of another way you can be productive. This calendar here is not my calendar. I can't put my own calendar in just because it's too personal. This is just a picture I found on the internet. Some people actually like to block their entire day out. If you find that you're like to be a very regimented person, which I do, you might like to do this. Unfortunately, when you have like a rotating schedule and things can just pop up, it's kind of difficult because you might just have something show up in the middle of the day. But if you don't have that and you have a very strict regimented day, you can actually set yourself blocked periods of time like this. If you want to, you don't have to. And yeah, that isn't mine. Don't try and stalk me. You won't be successful. And then here is another thing. This actually is mine. I've had to block out some things because when I set myself goals, I like to swear at myself. And some of them, I think the bottom one is like personal stuff I had to block out. But yeah, I basically wrote myself like I don't know what you'd call this, a schedule, and just tick things off. This is like the night before, so that's why I haven't ticked anything. I did do basically everything here. But yeah, you can set yourself kind of a schedule like this, even if it's just for the first few hours of the day, and just see if you can tick it off. I'll make another video on that probably, and I'm happy to answer any questions. But yeah, that is basically organization explained. The last thing we need to talk about is progressive overload. So I've already mentioned it, but it is actually a super useful tactic. If you haven't heard of the word progressive overload before, it's basically a gym term. You know, if you've heard of it, you're a gym guy. But yeah, progressive overload basically means increasing the difficulty of the exercise over time to get stronger. If you think about someone that's like, you know, really strong, they obviously started off normal and they had to lift like normal weights. They didn't start off like bench pressing 160 kilos. That would just be silly. But then over time, they had to actually, as they got stronger, they had to increase the weight. Someone who's really strong, like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Ronnie Coleman, I don't know if you know who those people are. Hopefully you do. They're obviously not benching like a very, very lightweight. They're not using the pink 1 kilo grandma dumbbells from Rebel Sport anymore. They're using really, really heavy weights. And that's of course because over time they've had to up the exercise that they're doing. And that is exactly the same in language learning and like basically everything. I think progressive overload is actually one of the most useful terms ever made because it just literally, it applies to literally any skill. So with language learning, if we want to actually make progress, we can't just do the same things over and over and over again. If you have a flashcard deck of colors, at a certain point you're going to learn the colors. If you keep doing those flashcards over, you're not going to get anywhere. You need to actually step it up. You need to introduce yourself to more learning materials. So, you know, new flashcard decks, learning new types of words. You need to do more of them. You need to, you know, do more different types of studies. So for example, instead of just repetition, you're also doing, you know, reading, you're speaking to people, you're recording yourself and listening back to it, etc. You're setting yourselves more tasks, you're setting yourselves difficult tasks. And yeah, you're just stepping up over time your habit tracker list of, you know, high ROI tasks that you're doing. So you're giving yourself, yeah, you can read that for yourself. But yeah, I think making progress in a language is kind of like making progress in the gym with muscle as well. Of course, if you're in the gym and your muscles aren't really hurting, you're not really going to make that much progress, especially if you're not a complete beginner. So if you're not actually pushing your comfort zone and doing things you don't fully understand as a language learner, like for example, if you're only listening to things you completely understand, you're never listening to anything where you don't understand some of the words, you're not going to make any progress because it's too easy. You need to constantly push yourself and you need to constantly up the difficulty of things you're doing. I think reflection, so looking back over time at your improvement and then looking at what you're good at and what you're not, is super good for like progressive overloading your habit tracker. I'll give you one really good tip, by the way. If you look at your habit tracker, for example, and say like, pretend this is like the end of the week, so I've already filled it out, but let's say I did nothing for language learning, like there were like basically no ticks, but everything else was good. I could look back and see, okay, my weakness at the moment is this one particular habit. I'm gonna make that my absolute priority next week. And I'm gonna I might even eat the frog, and I'm gonna do that straight away first thing in the day. So that is an example of reflection. Journaling is good as well. If you just wanna, you can journal in the language you're learning as well. That can be super useful. But if you just wanna kind of journal about, what you're good at, what you're not good at, and read it back, I've found that is kind of a great way of just being honest with yourself and understanding how you need to make progress. So yeah, you'll find you will make progress much more linearly. Like if you imagine a diagonal like progress arrow, that's going to be your progress when you're progressive overloading, rather than just kind of scrambling to find random tasks and you're disorganized and you've got brain fog because you ate carbs this morning, etc. You're just not going to make any progress. So yeah, make sure you are progressive overloading your habit tracker and you are doing things that are kind of difficult over time. But yeah, I've kept my promises, guys. I've defined consistency. I've explained why consistency is important. I've talked about what causes consistency, and I've talked about how to boost your consistency. Progressive overload, by the way, does actually boost your consistency because you're already being consistent and you're holding yourself accountable with more advanced habits. But yeah, I've kept all my promises, and in return, guys, I would really, really appreciate it if you are still watching at this point to drop a like and subscribe. It does really help the channel. It really makes me feel good about all the effort I put in for free, and I really do try and help you guys. As always, if you have any questions or concerns or anything, comment them down below. I'll do my best to help you. Check out the description. I've got links to all the other videos and a bunch of other useful stuff. I've got links in the description to my website and my Discord, and yeah, I'd highly recommend you get in touch with me, check those things out. And yeah, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. Good luck with your language learning, and yeah, have a good one.